What is consciousness? This is the question modern scientists, psychologists, psychiatrists, neuroscientists and philosophers still cannot find the answer to. Debates around this topic are going on to this day. For example, mainstream psychology simply believes that consciousness is related to the human brain, and this is man himself. Such an erroneous assumption misleads the society and entails serious consequences for future generations. So, what is consciousness? What research is being conducted by scientists? And what results are being hidden from the world community? What did the ancients know about it, and what role does it really play in modern society? Section 1. What is consciousness?
Mainstream psychology studies only a material component of a human being and associates the work of consciousness with functioning of the brain. But if truth be told, no one has actually given the answer to the question, what is consciousness? We can observe the activity of consciousness like the wind. That is, we cannot see the wind itself, but we can see the wind's track, footprints on the sand, the rustle of leaves, waves. It is the same with human consciousness. That is, we can observe the activity of consciousness as thoughts, emotions, and desires. And certainly, such a process, such a structure as consciousness, has not been found in the brain. Basically, this is quite easy to observe. Any person observing self, what happens inside of him, that is not in the outside world. And if he will just close his eyes, relax, and observe his own thoughts, mood, and sensations, well, a person can observe how this manifests itself. And it manifests very simply as flow of sensations, flow of thoughts, memories, desires, and emotions. That is, through all these, consciousness shows itself. One of the points of view, which is closer to the physical reality today, is that consciousness is not a product generated by brain cells. The following testify to this: comas, anesthesia, an ability to perceive without the five senses, ability to be conscious when the brain is flatlining, and on top of that, when neither the deep nor the surface structures function, and at that even one's heart is not functioning, meaning blood circulation in the brain has stopped, and yet the person retains consciousness. Extensive 5-year studies were conducted in Europe and in America. There are many facts. A man is in a coma, but he is watching what is happening in the surgery room. He sees people, and later on tells them who was doing what, although his brain is a flat line. It was not active at that moment at all. How is this possible? Consciousness was functioning, but by what means was he perceiving this if his brain was turned off? It was not functioning, and the man could perceive nothing with the five senses, with the brain. He was perceiving via consciousness, that is, at the level of other fields. He was perceiving, but not through his eyes, not through his ears. Otherwise, in his projection areas, in the cortex, there would have been some kind of activity, right? By the way, all this evidence is similar. In comas, as well as during surgeries, when a person is under general anesthetic, it's all the same. Consciousness is active, the brain is not. Moreover, there is a lot of other evidence that consciousness is, in essence, a field. That is, it is a field. And it's not an electromagnetic field, because when a person is screened, the electromagnetic field can be blocked. Electromagnetic waves will not be transmitted through the screens, any particular type of metal. Nonetheless, the vision without eyes continued, and transmission of thoughts at a distance. That is, all this was going on. Hence, they understood it was not the brain, and that this is related to field structures, to elementary particles. Namely, it is a field. Consciousness is a field.
About an alternative perception of information by a human being. In the popular program The Meaning of Life Immortality, academician Professor Igor Mikhailovich Danilov says that consciousness is an invisible part of the human structure, located outside of the brain.
На сегодняшний день, слава богу, уже не секрет. Сознание — это не просто мозг, это гораздо сложнее. И многие нейрофизиологи к этому пониманию уже пришли, работают в этом направлении. Но еще их же сознание этому противится. Ну, это дело будущего. Люди способны друг друга слышать и видеть, скажем так, духовными очами и духовным слухом. То есть на уровне чувственного восприятия. Это действительно так.
The science in principle is approaching this issue, but still there is no mutual agreement among the neurophysiologists. They still want to see the source of consciousness of human personality in the brain, in order to prove that a man is just a piece of meat, that he is material. This is advantageous. It is advantageous for control, since if a person considers himself to be the body, associates himself with the body, he or she will be afraid, will experience fear of death. Do you know what the statistics are now? 50% of people are mentally ill because of the tilt that occurred and was artificially created through science in people's world outlook. People began to associate themselves with the lower animal nature and have lost understanding of who they are in reality. They lost understanding of the meaning of life, lost understanding of perception through feelings, lost the ability to love, to be happy, to truly evolve. This is what causes all these mental disorders. What is the brain? Communication there takes place between nerve cells by means of nerve impulses and chemistry. That is, there are electrochemical interactions and they have a certain speed. So these processes of memories, thinking, perceptions, they're not possible at the cellular level and at the level of transmission of these impulses. This is too slow. That is, it can only occur at the level of a field, of physical fields. Therefore, they have understood that the brain tunes in, picks up thoughts, as it were, but does not generate them.
Он настраивается, он как бы просто улавливает мысли, но не генерирует их.
Thoughts are not ours. To this day, no one has managed to link any of the mental operations, which we attribute to the mind, directly to any part of the brain. Generally speaking, psyche, in its essence, is not a function of the brain, but constitutes a manifestation of some other, non-material, spiritual forces. Academician Pyotr Kuzmich Anokhin, psychologist.
Many scientists, by the way, are arriving at this conclusion that consciousness is not a product of brain activity, but rather the brain is a translator of information it receives from consciousness. That is, it simply recodes the information that exists at the field level. It is just that these facts are neither systematized nor revealed to the public. These works do exist, but no one makes them public. All of it gets immediately rejected as anti-science, and that's it. Although all the proof is there. Moreover, the founders of such sciences as neurophysiology and neurosurgery arrived at this conclusion. So these are not even ordinary members of the scientific community. No, these are the founders. Besides, this has been going on basically since the beginning of the 20th century. There was such a researcher as Charles Sherrington, British scientist, the founder of modern neurophysiology. He stated absolutely unequivocally, he performed a large number of experiments, by the way, with the help of very simple equipment. They could only dream about what's available now. So he arrived at a conclusion that the brain is just a receiving and translating device, that the brain collaborates with consciousness, but in no way does the brain produce it. This was his conclusion, and his students, such as neurosurgeon Panfield, who was performing surgeries on the brain all his life, he did 1,000 of them, observing functioning of the brain, such as Eccles, a world-famous neurophysiologist and Nobel laureate, who arrived at the conclusion that the brain is only a transmitter. It receives information, recodes it, and passes it on. He announced this at one of very prestigious scientific conventions.
About the brain. Brain is an intermediary between the mind and the world. It perceives and tries to decode, codes various signals, including those coming from the five senses. But it is especially important to note that the brain is able to perceive many other signals as well, which come not only from the visible, but also from the invisible world. Anastasia Novych, АЛЛАТРА.
Natalia Petrovna Bakhtyrova arrived at the same conclusion. She's the head of the Institute of Human Brain in St. Petersburg. She said that before she had been shocked when Eccles stated that consciousness was a field structure. But later on, her own scientific discoveries confirmed that, because they were examining all sorts of so-called extrasensory manifestations. And it inevitably changed Natalia Petrovna's point of view. A lot of scientists, in fact, confirm this, and even state that this phenomenon is not of the electromagnetic nature, that is, a person can directly perceive information from the septon field. Directly.
Consciousness is a field structure that has not been found in the brain. In the usual mode of perception, a human being can only observe products of the activity of consciousness in the form of emotions, thoughts, active animal states, but not the field of consciousness, the septon field, or the animal mind itself. Consciousness is not a product of brain activity. And this is proved by manifestations of consciousness when a person is in a coma or under anesthetic, as well as by the possibility of perception without the five senses, etc. Brain is a receiver and transmitter of information received by it from consciousness, as well as from the outside world, by means of the five senses. And not only that. That is, it simply processes, recodes and implements the information which exists at the field level, for example, in person's speech or behavior. Valentin Felixovich Voyna-Yasenetsky, in his book about the spirit, the soul and the body, wrote, "Brain is not an organ of thought, feelings, consciousness, the feeling for the reality of life. Spirit exceeds brain limits, determining brain activities and our entire existence." The septon field is an integrated information field. The septon field is the main component of the entire material universe. This field is everywhere. It forms the basis of all currently known and yet unknown to official science fields and interactions, material objects, organic and inorganic compounds, etc. A known septon field may be found in any animate and inanimate objects and phenomena. From the report Primordial АЛЛАТРА Physics. As practice has demonstrated, it is possible not only to study, but also to manage natural processes and get accurate forecasts of natural events, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, tornadoes. For more information, please refer to the report on the problems and consequences of global climate change on Earth, effective ways to solve these problems.
The information field, it is also called the septon field, also called the animal mind, is an integrated field that unites all living beings at its foundation. And not only living beings, it is the basis of the entire material universe. Such term as collective intelligence is used in biology, collective unconsciousness in psychology, and egregore in metaphysics. It is in the basis of all visible and invisible manifestations, such as gravity, space, time, all bioenergetic radiations, all animate and inanimate objects, macro and micro objects. They're all united by the single large septon field, which is in fact the information field.
The septon field, The animal mind is the highest self-conscious rational structure of matter, which perceives itself as living in the real world. Septon is the unique component of the septon field. It is its smallest component. From the primordial Allatra physics report. How does the impact of this invisible intelligent force on the material world manifest itself? Why is scientific evidence of its existence and impact on people concealed from the public? What do researchers say about this integrated information field, which back in ancient times was called the animal mind?
Various scientists, they have approached this already. However, they call this field the axion field. There was such a name as the torsion field. That is, the field consisting of elementary particles. Now, there's a lot of interesting research on plants and bacteria, which shows that there's indeed a kind of a universal field of consciousness. A good example in the way of proof would be studies performed by Clive Baxter as long ago as in the 1960s. Clive Baxter was a scientist, biologist from the United States. He studied plants and in the course of his experiments discovered that all plants reacted to emotions, even the unspoken intentions of a person, manifesting complex, differentiated emotions similar to human emotions, such as resentment, joy, anger, and fear. After that, a whole surge of studies came out, in the course of which scientists had to admit that some kind of information field did exist, and regardless of whether plants or other animate beings have a nervous system or not, they're capable of capturing emanations of more developed beings. But they could not explain what constitutes the basis of it, and how to explain it at that point of time. Yet, thank God, today such studies are performed, and owing to a group of Allatra science researchers, we can understand more deeply what the information field is and how it functions.
Primordial Allatra physics gives a deeper understanding of the origin and evolution of the universe. It opens up new milestones in the field of cosmology, quantum physics, space biology, gravitational biology and biotechnology, planetary science and physics of the heliosphere and near-Earth space, physics of cosmic rays and exoatmospheric astrophysics. As they say, when you have universal keys in your hands, knowledge about the basics of elementary particles, you can open any door to the microcosm and the macrocosm. Everything on the planet Earth, from the microcosm to the macrocosm, lives by its own particular laws. Let us consider what lies in the basis of material life on the planet, what governs nature and living organisms. Take, for example, the effect known today as the 100th monkey effect, the essence of which is as follows. In Japan, on the island of Hasim, there lived a group of monkeys, and scientists were feeding them with sweet potatoes, throwing potatoes around on the sand. Monkeys really liked sweet potatoes, but they did not like the sand on it. Then one day an 18-month-old female Ima found out she could solve the problem by washing the sweet potato. She taught this to other monkeys. And when the number of monkeys who learned to wash sweet potatoes reached 100, all the monkeys living on nearby islands, suddenly, without any external motivations, also started washing potatoes. An impression arises that separate individuals seem to be parts of a certain single superorganism, and their nervous system and brain are components of a common field. The septon field or the animal mind does exist, and there is much proof of this. But it is only a program of the material world. At that, a human being, structurally, unlike other creatures inhabiting the planet, is endowed with the soul, an immaterial spiritual component. And it is all about what a person chooses, to exist within the strict limits of the Septon field, or to live for the sake of the soul, developing the real, the deep, the eternal within.
A good example of the uniform information field is also fungus mycelium. While familiarizing ourselves a little bit with the physiology of the fungus, we can encounter a phenomenon which many people are already aware of, such as those who have seen what an internet server looks like, a graphic depiction of internet servers. It is almost identical to how fungus mycelium looks. It can spread over hundreds of acres. Well, for example, here you can say that the biggest creature on our planet is a fungus, Armillaria solidite, which spreads over 880 acres of forest area. It is all one single living creature. Moreover, what is interesting here is that this whole network of these fibrils demonstrates amazing intelligence. If something happens in one part of the network, it manifests itself in another part of it. If, for example, one throws out organic waste in one part of this network, somehow changes take place in the entire network, and it starts to relocate itself in this direction. Those who work with the internet can understand that in the hottest spots, so to say, where intersections of the central fibrils of mycelium are, they're getting strengthened, amplified. There comes more power at the expense of less important fibrils, which are located at more remote routes. That is, this whole living organism demonstrates absolute intelligence without having any control center that would be visible to us. Human consciousness is part of the common field of the animal mind, of the common septon field that unites, like an internet network, all consciousnesses into a single whole. That is why all processes taking place at the level of one's individual consciousness immediately become available to all other consciousnesses. If a person has experienced some kind of emotion, arrived at a certain conclusion or decision, or learned something, it becomes absolutely available to the whole universe. That is, we're all as united at the level of this field as via the internet.
How does the animal mind act in a human? The animal mind constantly affects man one way or another through its branch, the animal nature, which is part of the material world. In most cases, people do not even realize it. Thoughts are just there, and a person thinks they are his property. It is difficult for people to detect actions and thoughts of the animal mind within themselves when they are not aware of their dual nature and consequently do not monitor all that inside of themselves. Hence, they regard manifestations of the animal mind's will as their own thoughts, desires, emotions, etc. Person is actually free only in his own choice. But he is not free from thoughts, because his consciousness, observer, as a matter of fact, does not produce them, but only chooses between two streams: thoughts and motivations from the spiritual nature, his will, and thoughts and desires from the animal mind, its will. That is, man can choose the will which he likes, or which has attracted him, and apply the power of his attention to it, and such power engenders action. That is the key moment of the human choice. Анастасия Новых, АЛЛАТРА.
Опять-таки сознание, да, мы берем сознание. Ведь сознание, оно есть везде. А давай посмотрим на тот же муравейник. Насколько все слажено. Один муравей, какой у него там мозг?
Представляет собой.
Есть хитрые муравьи, которые выполняют функцию. Но что им движет? Да, тем же муравьем. Коллективный разум. Значит, есть разум. И есть некое сознание, которое над всей популяцией управляет. И есть такое же сознание общее, скажем, и в глобальном масштабе, и у нас здесь, скажем, на Земле, которое отводит людям, и у каждого человека, пусть оно как секвестрик от общего, он индивидуальный, это сознание. И в принципе это инструмент, которым мы должны пользоваться. Да? Это как бортовой компьютер нашего автомобиля, которым мы пользуемся. Не он нам диктует. Но иногда получается так, а в настоящее время в нашей жизни сейчас бортовой компьютер нам диктует, как нам жить, как нам ехать и куда нам ехать. И он нам навязывает вот этот шаблон живой, что мы есть часть автомобиля, и с автомобилем мы идем. Но бортовой компьютер может ли, скажем, оценить, какой бы он умный ни был, сверхсовременный, твои духовные потребности? Нет, конечно. Конечно нет. Он будет ограничен своими возможностями, так же, как и ограничен наше сознание, и тем более ограничен наш мозг. Хотя мозг и сознание — это вещи разные. Мы уже об этом немножко упоминали, и слава Богу, что есть такое уже понимание. Видишь, уже прорыв идет. Даже с помощью нашего ума можно прийти к пониманию, что есть и другой мир, а не только это.
Section 2. Exploring and studying consciousness. Who am I?
A human being has a spiritual component and a material component, so to say. It may be called the animal part. What belongs to the material part? Human body and consciousness. Yes, it is a field structure, it is a field, but it is still material. Ego is a part of consciousness, that is, it is a self-description, a product of the activity of consciousness, a structure of self-identification of consciousness. That is, ego is an aggregate activity of consciousness, thinking, memory, perception, ideas, sensations. All these are produced by ego with its behavior patterns, with its specific goals, motives, etc. And also there is a part from the spiritual world, because the soul is a part of the spiritual world with an enormous potential. It is like a gateway to the spiritual world. This part is what's called the personality or spirit. It is what used to be called the higher self, the true self. When a baby is born, we remember that the soul enters the body on the 8th day. And on the 8th day, both consciousness and personality become active. Consciousness and personality have a self-identification ability. At that, what is, so to say, the product of self-identification of consciousness? It is our ego. In psychology, ego is often confused with personality. Ego is believed to be the personality. That is, when they talk about personality, they're actually talking about ego. Ego is a description. Well, for example, I'm Tanya. I live in such and such place. I have such and such profession and family status. This is a story about oneself which our mind creates. But these roles, statuses, and qualities, they're subject to change. They can be lost. For instance, we lose the opportunity to work in a certain profession, but we do not cease to exist because of this. We can learn something new, get to know something else. Here the problem is not in such description itself, but in our attachment to it. That is, when we begin to consider ourselves to be these thoughts, these words, here's where all the problems arise. Since a person loses something important for oneself, something valuable, that is, the description has nothing to do with the true human personality.
Personality is whom a person feels himself to be while alive, the one who makes a choice between the spiritual and animal natures, one who analyzes, draws conclusions, and accumulates personal experience of sensory and emotional dominance. From the book *ALLATRA* by Anastasia Novых.
Личность каждого человека — это часть Святого Духа, чтобы было понятно, да? А душа — это часть мира духовного. Душа может носить самостоятельно такой вот характер, как или индивидуальность какую-то, как некое существо, да, разумное? Нет, не может. Не может. А личность — это уже существо, которое разумное, которое действительно, а этим наделен только Дух Святой, вот, по воле Бога. Поэтому его часть есть везде. Почему все люди братья?
In order to self-identify, it is important for the personality to get experience of contact with the spiritual nature, i.e. with the soul. That is simply to feel this connection, to understand that I am. It's just this. In essence, personality is only a presence, an observer. It is impossible to describe it otherwise. Personality observes, contemplates.
Тот, который говорят дух человеческий, это и есть, как мы уже говорили, то, что называется личностью. А ум, то есть сознание, это как раз и есть та часть от противоположной стороны, заведомо мертвой. Поэтому я бы не путал. Дух он вечен, а сознание временно, ум временно.
At that, consciousness imposes upon us what we should be, how we should live, and where we should go. It imposes desires, thoughts, emotions. So where am I going with this? Consciousness is necessary, but it has its own place. Consciousness is a good servant, but a bad master.
В момент, когда личность входит в человека, скажем так, она входит уже в готовый сосуд. И не секрет, что на 8-й день от рождения и до 8-го дня человек — это просто автомобиль без программы и без водителя, скажем так. На 8-й день в него включается уже осознанная программа, потому что у него сел водитель, он активирует это все. Поэтому и получается, что водитель, он должен, скажем так, осознать, что он водитель. Он не часть бортовой системы, и он ни в коем случае не колесо.
Manifestation of consciousness.
Человек дуален. И доминирует в этом материальном мире то, что большей частью преобладает. А что преобладает в материальном мире? Материя. А так как человек — это часть природы, часть этого мира, сознание у него материально, естественно, он будет стремиться выживать. А процесс выживания в мире зверей, он таков: хочешь лучше и мягче спать — обмануй, хитри, побеждай. Хочешь пожирнее, послаще кусок — обмануй, хитри и тому подобное. Разве не так? Так.
And how does the ego manifest itself? Egocentricity, such as, I am the most important person in the universe, and the whole world exists to satisfy my needs, meaning all other people as well. Now imagine there are 7.5 billion of such most important ones, and we want there to be no conflicts? This is precisely a manifestation of ego. Now let's move on. Everyone strives to dominate, to control others. Parents want to control children, wife wants to control her husband, the husband his wife. That is, everyone wants to show in some way his or her superiority over another person by various criteria, intellectual, external, or spiritual. Whereas in the animal world, it is the same. Such dominance comes from there, the desire to show off, that I'm better, I'm stronger, I'm more beautiful. And the second point is a consumer attitude. I need to take whatever I want and to strive for it, and to fight off those who are in my way, and the pursuit of pleasure. That is why they call it the lower animal self. It is fully consistent with this name. However, a human being has something greater than consciousness, because you have someone inside who can observe all this, right? In all ancient spiritual traditions and philosophical systems, such an observer was called the true self, or the human personality. The personality knows that it possesses an infinite potential, and there is the same potential in another person, and it feels itself to be absolutely equal to any person, and does not strive to exalt itself over anyone.
Просто одно дело, когда мозг доминирует над личностью, тогда масса проблем. Когда личность становится свободной, в первую очередь, от диктатуры материального мира, все становится на свои места. Понимаешь, это как в анекдоте, когда встречаются двое знакомых, друг друга давно не видели, один второго спрашивает: слушай, говорит, вот у меня, говорит, всегда был вопрос к тебе, говорит, как ты, говорит, можешь быть все время спокойный, радостный, такой, удовлетворенный жизнью, говорит, ведь столько проблем и тому подобное. Он говорит: ну как, говорит, я просто с дураками не спорю, говорит, никогда. Он говорит: ну это же невозможно, так же жить нельзя, говорит. Ну нельзя, так нельзя.
Whatever happens to us, whatever happens in our life, everything depends on how we regard it, how we perceive it. Ego is associated with emotions, positive and negative ones. Well, look, if what we want comes true, then we experience positive emotions. The brain rewards us with positive emotions. If it does not come true, then we experience negative emotions. This here is a factory of emotions, passions, attachments, desires, the sagittal section. If our expectations come true, if we get what we want, here positive emotions are generated. If we do not get it, negative emotions arise. And as a result of all this neurochemistry, this part of us endeavors to manage this whole area here.
В действительности они живут прошлым и мечтами о будущем. Никто не живет настоящим. В этом проблема. Почему? Потому что в данном мире, мы уже обсуждали, по-моему, есть только прошлое и будущее. Нет настоящего в материи. Оно слишком скоротечно. А в духовном мире там нет прошлого и нет будущего. Поэтому он и вечный, потому что там всегда настоящий.
Consciousness is completely oriented at the past. It does not have other time, not even a future, by the way. Because even future forecasts, these plans a person makes, how does he do it? He pulls out of his consciousness his experience, some of his previous knowledge, and using all these, tries to plan something in the future. That is why our plans are often inadequate for the situation, and it is important for a person to have some freedom and flexibility so that these plans can be implemented, and these goals could come true at the moment of now. And the personality always lives in the present, because it is an eternal part of us. It has neither past nor future. It can enjoy and experience in the present moment. Here, there is a key moment. First of all, a human being is a personality who can see everything, the content of his consciousness, and control it with his attention. And secondly, can perceive any life situation in a different way. Can a man sitting on the couch get stressed? Easily. He can remember something, recall an offense, and he will have stress. And there is no need for any external situation, any circumstance, only consciousness. And the task of each person, it was always the first step on the path of self-improvement, is to become the master of your consciousness, that is, the master of your desires, emotions, and thoughts.
Defense mechanism of self-concept.
If a person is led by his consciousness, by his desire, then consciousness always wants to dominate and experience pleasures. It does not need anything else, and does it so as to avoid straining itself at the same time, that is, at someone else's expense. We discussed the fact that ego is, in essence, a description of oneself. It is answers to the questions, who am I? What kind of a person am I? What do I want? What can I do? What belongs to me? A person has described himself this way, and he begins to defend it. Everything that lies beyond these limits is dangerous for him, violates his stability, and he will rebel. Well, for example, if I describe myself that I'm lily white, kind, a good person, and then suddenly such emotion as anger appears in me, and it does not fit into my concept of myself, so I will deny it. No, I'm not angry, so I need to suppress this anger and stand in front of you with a cute smile, although in fact inside of me everything might be exploding from this irritation. That is, defending my concept of self at the moment, I distort the reality, lie to myself and to you, because you see my smile, whereas in reality, an angry, irritated person is in front of you. Can you imagine what human consciousness is engaged in? The poor thing is only occupied with defending itself one way or another, inventing more and more sophisticated defenses. That is, there's this paranoia inside of us, which is in a fighting stance every second, because everything is a danger to it. Everything that cannot be controlled is dangerous. In our brain, there is a structure called the amygdala. So the amygdala is like an octopus. It has offshoots, connections with absolutely the whole brain. If our brain evaluates something as unsafe, as threatening to us, within 65 milliseconds, the amygdala brings the whole brain to an alarm state, a full fighting alert. That as you see, we do not even have time to realize it, but it evaluates, compares associatively to a memory. This is dangerous, it is a threat to us in some way, and brings the entire brain, and hence the whole body, into a state of full fighting readiness, anxiety or aggression. For animals, this has to do with the instinct of self-preservation, for us to react that fast. Are there people here who drive a car? If someone crosses the street unexpectedly, we do something, right? And only then fear arises. Our body turns to jelly, and our heart begins to jump out. That is how the structure reacts. But the human paradox is that a person reacts just the same way, not just when there is a threat to his physical safety, but when there is a threat to his convictions or opinions. Well, in fact, to his pride, his ego. That is, if someone has criticized us, made a demand, we will have exactly the same reaction. Something has been taken away, it's a danger. It is necessary to defend oneself. Even some views, outlook, opinions about oneself are shaken. It is dangerous. It is necessary to defend oneself, somehow to lie to oneself in order to ensure that the image of oneself, an idea about oneself, remains unchanged. If there is a threat to our ego, it's the same as a threat to our physical safety. Consciousness. Human consciousness is the only structure in the living world which can even destroy the body for the sake of its pride. When a person is even ready to destroy his body in order to prove something to someone, to prove by this action his own point of view that he is right, we understand the whole catastrophe if we distinguish this consciousness as the main unit, as oneself, as a product of self-identity, or we believe ego to be ourselves. Imagine what a disaster that is. As a matter of fact, the whole crisis of our society has happened because of this disaster, because we consider ourselves to be that one, and that is not even a predator. If we take a person with an evolved intellect and a boosted ego, no predator can hold a candle. Such a person becomes a parasite who can consume everything for himself. But if he behaves like a personality, lives as a soul, then everything changes. If a person understands he is a free spirit, a personality with a great potential, then he can change all these descriptions as he likes. Such a person does not need them. He will have a profession which is now needed for the constructive activity in the society, and that which is necessary, that's what will be. Say a relationship has terminated. Well, I was happy in such a relationship, and I will be no less happy without it. Somewhere inside feels a little sad. We said goodbye, but we're open and we're free for the tasks that life puts before us, the new tasks. Any situation is a school. It teaches us something. As they say that God talks to man in the language of life circumstances, the school of life, its purpose is for a person to become a mature personality, a strong spirit. It is when to the question, who am I? The person always answers, I am the eternal, spiritually free creature with an infinite potential for growth.
Consciousness is a consumer.
We have realized that consciousness for a human being, in the positive sense, is an instrument of adaptation and survival in the material world, as well as to some extent an instrument of the material world exploration within its limited scope and capabilities. But in relation to personality, consciousness is a predator. Why? Consciousness is exploitative by nature. By itself, it has no energy for living. Personality has. It gets pure creative energy from the soul, constantly. Consciousness has no other way, and its task is to make personality interested in giving away its attention by any means. In order to get energy, consciousness needs to get the personality's attention. Therefore, consciousness, in relation to a human being, is a predator. Consciousness will always provoke human personality into giving away attention by causing interest in something or causing certain emotions. So, in essence, through the sphere of emotions and desires, consciousness gets this energy.
Что такое эмоция? Эмоция — это зеркальное отражение на искривленном зеркале того чувства, которое должно быть, понимаешь? То есть получается, сила чувств, она искажается и переводится в эмоцию. Конечно, временно существующую. Ни одна тень не может существовать вечно.
Consciousness manifests itself via programs of the animal mind, aspiration for self-preservation, aspiration for procreation, extension of its genome into the future through descendants. And the last, a third one, desire to dominate, superiority over others, chosenness. By any characteristic, I'm the most beautiful, the richest, the smartest, the most spiritual, and I must prove this to others by any means. All these programs, what is their purpose? What is their meaning? One purpose and one meaning: to obtain energy for its life. If a person does not develop spiritually and does not strive to gain a real life, an eternal life, as a spiritual being, then his consciousness will distort the impulse coming from the soul, the aspiration for eternity, freedom, and will convert it into an aspiration for procreation, will put the birthing and upbringing of children, etc., in the forefront, as priority in the person's life, because an illusion appears that this way I will prolong myself in time with the help of children, by virtue of children. So when people set such high goals for themselves, live for the children, they think this is a spiritual purpose. But in fact, it is just a program of the animal mind, aimed at prolongation of one's own genome into the future. And here, please take notice, when the society loses spiritual guidance, when a person forgets why he or she is living, there's always the cult of children. Children become the most important, value number one in such case. A human being forgets he himself has come here to evolve. That is, I'm not saying that you should not do this, but there's another task here. That is, if we want to continue ourselves with the help of children, even at the unconscious level, appeasing the program of consciousness, then what are we doing, in fact? We're simply implementing the program of the animal mind. But if we create conditions for spiritual development of a child's personality, then we're acting as a spiritual being, and will support formation of precisely the child's personality as that of a spiritual being. Consciousness is always striving to split up and divide everything. Everything means any information. How is this manifested in our lives? Well, for example, a person in any environment, no matter where he or she has found himself, in the office, on a train, he immediately begins to identify borders, limit his own space, mark territory. Here is my own space. This is my territory. In the transport, wherever he is, he will immediately divide, set external marks as any other animal. An animal does the same thing. Namely, it is separation, separation from everything else. I'm separate from God, from the spiritual world. I'm separate from the others. The connection with the spiritual world is lost. The feeling of oneself as of an eternal spiritual being is lost, and then all other behavior patterns are triggered. If you are separate from eternity within yourself, then yes, fear arises. And based on this, everything external in relation to you becomes either desired or dangerous. If I'm separate, then I can take something by appropriating it. Hence, here is consumerism, the desire to control and dominate all the time. That is, there is nothing inside me, and I can only accept material gifts, statuses, respect, love, attention from the outside. I can get everything only from the outside. Hence, for ego, the external occupies first place, while the internal moves to the last place. Well, here already all complex emotions start, and all fears, in fact, that arise in a person, they're related to this very point. I'm not eternal, so I am mortal. I must somehow survive among others, feel better, more significant, feel my own superiority over all others. Then I have more chances to survive as part of the animal mind system. This is egocentricity and domination. It's essentially a result of the fact that a person loses the feeling of oneself, the feeling of unity with all people, and most importantly, with God, with the spiritual world. Well then, imagine there's a natural flow inside of you, like a river is flowing, and this flow never stops. That is why you are alive. You are alive because there is the flow, and it flows continuously. But then we ourselves come out of the stream. What do we need to do? Just to go back there. The stream is still there. It's we who have walked out.
Сознание — это часть мира материального, поэтому оно лживо изначально. Но то, что внутри человека, оно никогда не лжет. Тот духовный, внутренний потенциал, он в действительности огромен. Личность обладает колоссальной силой, которая способна преодолеть все попытки сознания каким-то образом поработить личность. Ну, опять-таки, если будет на то стремление самой личности к истинной свободе, если оно не будет удерживаться иллюзиями сознания за этот трехмерный мир. Все просто.
Section 3. How to free oneself from the bondage of consciousness and gain true freedom. The mechanism of the conception of feelings.
See here, everything is very simple. A human being has only one feeling, coming from the soul. It is the closest and most understandable to our consciousness through the words love and unity. This aspiration, connection, unity with another person, unity with God, in fact with the whole universe, is that very impulse, the feeling emanating from the soul. A human being is born, and he's in contact with the source. He has a connection with the source. It is not necessary for him to learn anything. He knows what it is. It is a natural state of a human being to be happy and to be in love. We should live this way. It is our way.
Жизнь должна приносить только удовольствие. Жизнь не может давать разочарование, ибо это не жизнь. Жизнь не может быть плохой и не может огорчать. В этом смысл жизни. Жизнь — это радость, это любовь. Настоящую любовь. И настоящая жизнь, я имел в виду. А существование, оно всегда с кучей проблем. Потому что это и есть существование. Оно временное и ограничено.
If you dig deeper into any process, love will be at the heart of it. And then it already gets distorted, interpreted by our consciousness. Here we come back to the source. This deep inner feeling is the source. You know, it is like the sunlight going through a prism that breaks the single white color into lots and lots of different colors.
Rigden. The initial impetus of any feeling comes from the deepest inner force, which comes from the soul. Since the soul is a very powerful particle from the non-material world, it always has one vector of movement, one wish, to escape from this world into its own world, which people call the spiritual world, the world of God. When such a deep feeling arises, our material brain begins to react to that power and consequently to interpret this feeling through our consciousness in its own way. This process can be figuratively compared to light dispersion when a single wave is divided into several waves of different lengths. Consciousness, with the accumulated experience of its associations, is like a prism which divides the single force and directs it to numerous small constituents, thoughts, which add hues to this force. Whatever is dominant in the person's consciousness, such is the shade of thoughts, such are the desires. Thanks to this force, thoughts from the animal nature make desires themselves hyper-colorful and attractive in an illusory way. That is, in essence, they do not correspond to reality once realized, because they are empty. Simply put, the dominant thoughts on which attention is focused direct the power of the single deepest feeling towards implementing a person's desires. Anastasia. As they say, force will always be force. It is the person's choice, and where he directs this force, that matter. From the Allatra book. Pitfalls of consciousness, thoughts, emotions, desires.
When a person pays attention to such distortions, programs and patterns of consciousness, it occurs most often via negative thoughts that cause what in us? Negative emotions. A person always has those thoughts which have been chosen by his personality. He invests attention in them. Then consciousness begins to twist it. In other words, say a thought on some subject came to you, kind of a scary one. I will probably be fine. For example, something like this. Look, thoughts that we choose, they always have a prerequisite. And what is a prerequisite for this? Number one, it is something external. And secondly, it is emotional. And our desires must correspond to this. Then we will choose them. Otherwise, if we are indifferent to this, will we choose this thought and spin it out? No. If we do not want it, will we choose it? Well, it is totally uninteresting to us. That is, emotions, desires must be present, otherwise we do not choose the thought. It is for us a tasty bit, only in this case. We're either afraid of it or we want it. Then it spins out further. I will be fine for this or that amount. And if they look deeper into my blunders, they can dismiss me from work altogether. And that's it. You're already panicking. Well, did you have such a situation? Everybody has experienced this. In other words, consciousness is very fast in spinning it out, makes a snowball out of any situation. And what do? You shift attention. I will think about this, but I will not think about that. Attention is a tool of the personality. It directs a ray here or there about what to think, what to feel, etc., what to pay attention to give energy to, and what not to give away your life energy to.
Ведь что такое сила, да, человеческая, которая наделяет? Сила внимания, назовем ее так, да. Наделил мысль силой внимания, эта мысль становится материальной, она начинает реализовываться. Правильно?
Да.
Правильно. И у человека в действительности есть выбор. Вот он может идти вправо или влево, взять одно или другое в руки, слушать кого-то или не слушать. Это его право. Но когда он слушает беса, он наделяет этого беса силой своего внимания. А что такое сила внимания, если мы глянем? Это то, к чему мы прислушиваемся, то, что мы впитываем в себя, частью чего мы становимся. Правильно? Правильно. Получается, слушая беса, кем ты станешь?
Бесом.
Абсолютно правильно.
Получается, каждый человек обладает свободой выбора, что ему выбирать, какую сторону,
Конечно,
каким путем идти в этой жизни.
В этом и заключается. И за эту свободу в действительности люди бьются. Они ищут той свободы, которой наделены изначально.
Let's keep going. There's also such a thing as emotional evaluation. We're constantly evaluating ourselves, good, bad, and we evaluate everything. It is nice or not nice. It is good or evil. It brings me pleasure or it brings me suffering. That is, we constantly evaluate everything, and we suffer because of this too. Such a category of thoughts exists also. How do we cope with these thoughts? Well, the first thing you should not do is to fight with them in any way, because when we're fighting with them, we give them energy. We're strengthening them, those negative thoughts. As a matter of fact, it is possible to switch from such thoughts to either constructive and creative thoughts, namely solutions, expansion of the context in general, viewing things in terms of how what I'm doing now will benefit my development, the development of my personality. Or you can retreat into feelings, specifically the deepest feelings. The deepest feelings are available to everyone. Through the deepest feelings, everyone is able to discover in themselves the light of truth, illuminating for them the path home. In what other way can consciousness, the animal mind system through consciousness, its little part, get that same energy? How, in other words, can the interest of personality be invoked? That is, for example, to keep attention on the external all the time, or on thoughts that cause some desires in us, such as desire to obtain something in the outside world, material benefits, status, power, etc. Everything that a person wishes for in this material world is indeed temporary and mortal. The animal nature is diverse in its cunning tricks. If a person does not understand himself, it is very difficult for him in this life, and even harder after it. And it is not even a matter of external conditions, but of the human choice. Life flies by very quickly, and the most terrible thing in human existence is not the death of one's body. The worst thing is when a person has lived his life in the illusory oblivion of this world, having understood nothing. But one needs only to wake up spiritually, look at the reality sensibly, expose animal nature's actions, first of all in oneself, and cease being its conductor. There is no darkness, only where bright light is shining.
Нужно изучить, кто диктует в тебе. Кто тобой манипулирует? В тебе манипулирует. Не с откуда-то там, из телевизора или с прессы, или еще что-то там с интернета вылазит. Нет, в тебе. Кто заставляет тебя обращать внимание, вкладывать силу твоего внимания в пустое, ненужное тебе, в сиюминутное и бледное? Кто заставляет тебя интересоваться тем, что тебе в действительности не нужно? Кто заставляет тебя думать и переживать о том, к чему ты не имеешь никакого отношения? И зачем? Вот когда ты это понимаешь, изучаешь, а это изучается как раз мозгом. Он сам себя познает и сам загоняется в тупик. А зайдя в тупик, он дает свободу личности. Очень просто. Просто нельзя лениться. Нужно действительно работать.
Very often people ask this question, why do I want it so much but I don't get it? Well, some people do not care and they have it. Well, for example, I want a child and I cannot conceive. While people who are not interested in this at all give birth to children in a natural way, and they do not apply any effort. Why does it happen this way? It is very interesting, because if a person wants something and does not get it, what happens? He experiences negative emotions. The person not only aspires for something, meaning there is passion, but in addition, there are negative emotions, because he's not getting it. And as long as he's not getting it, but he's investing money in it, he's investing time in it, attending various specialists, there will be no result. Well, and this is how he splendidly gives out an enormous amount of energy, in fact, to the septon field, or the animal mind, through the work of his consciousness. Yet there is another way. Let's say a person wants something very much and actually gets it. What happens next? It would seem he or she should be happy, but the person is happy for exactly 5 minutes. Then he becomes afraid of losing it. Over time, fear arises. Now I need to save it, to keep it. Hence, the positive emotion is replaced in him by a negative one. So happens such a sad story. And again, the person will be giving energy to the septon field or the animal mind for an infinitely long time. The energy that is given to him for spiritual transformation. But at any moment, one can make a switch. That is, no matter how much one is fixated on an issue, no matter how much of the person's attention is invested in it, he can change everything at any point. He can let the situation go, accept it if it's impossible to change conditions. For example, in case of disability, or switch to communion with God. But God's love does not forsake one. Even when one forgets about it, God never leaves a person, because His love, thanks to the soul, is always with him. However, man does not always want to accept this eternal love and often postpones the innermost exploration of it until later, guided by short-term, temporary desires of mortal matter. However, one does not have the later. There is only here and now, where true progress and choice take place. One just needs to open up and trust God. There is no point in losing precious time of life. As soon as an attack of the animal nature has begun, stimulating a feeling of loneliness, one just needs to immediately overcome this earthly selfhood within oneself and address God with sincerity of a child, relying on His will. Just address Him any way you can, with your sincere words, thoughts, and most importantly, with the internal deepest feeling as towards the closest and dearest one. When a person starts communicating with his soul with the feeling of deep repentance, God's love is multiplied in him many times over. God comes into the soul and gives it peace. It becomes the source of inexhaustible inner strength for a person, revives the spirit of faith in him, gives an opportunity to realize the experience obtained and to acquire a new view of his life.
Она возрождает в нем дух веры, предоставляет возможность осознать полученный опыт и приобрести новый взгляд на свою жизнь.
По поводу вот этих еще мыслей. Значит, есть такая
More regarding these thoughts. So there is such a category of thoughts called expectations. We always expect something. If it does not happen, we get upset, right? Therefore, it is important to eliminate attachment to expectations that we have with respect to any situation. How can this be done? We can do it very easily if we start to consider any experience as good and enriching for us. This is how the limbic system functions. If our expectations get fulfilled, there is a surge of positive emotions. If they are not fulfilled, there is a surge of negative emotions. This is the way our limbic system keeps us under control. It keeps us in the emotional bondage. At that, if we're not attached to any emotions, any experience is good for us. That is, every day, no matter what happens, find a resource in this day. Find zest in it. Find in it a blessed gift, good gift, kind gift for yourself. What have you learned? Where have you been nudged to? What have you discovered within yourself? What have you cognized? We are explorers here, scientists. We're engaged in exploration of ourselves. We're engaged in self-knowledge. We traverse part of our path when we learn, acquire wisdom, experience, and knowledge. If spiritual development is a priority for us, we understand, all in all, what our personality is doing here, in what conditions it exists, how important this choice is, how important it is to remain in a balanced state, how important it is to direct this energy exactly towards the main goal of our life. Well, in such case, will it be of great value for us whether any of our expectations are fulfilled or not? If we are fixated on the material, of course. Say one's husband came home from work and did not pay a compliment. This is already a tragedy. But the fact that at this moment we simply, so to say, have taken a few steps backwards in our development, it is not of interest to us. That is, generally speaking, our incomprehension and wrong priorities create such problems. With thoughts, it is easy if we understand the context. Expand consciousness, recall immediately, who am I? What am I doing here? What tasks are facing me? And if I continue thinking these thoughts, where am I going?
Просто уделить этому немножко внимания. Просто посидеть и понаблюдать, как мысли приходят. Как ты влажишь силу внимания, и мысль тебя цепляет. То есть достаточно сел, расслабился, сидишь спокойно. Простой пример. И наблюдаешь. Вот вроде бы мыслей нет, но ты не можешь избавиться от них вообще. Их масса. И вот если понаблюдать, то разнопланово их очень много. И одновременно они приходят. Их невозможно успокоить. Ты все время о чем-то думаешь. Но ты ли думаешь? Или это просто как радиоволны, которые идут постоянно, проходят через тот приемник, а тебе достаточно лишь переключать. Да? Вот когда ты переключил, настроился на одну волну, идет одна музыка, на другую новости. Вот это вот и есть вложение силы внимания и активация той или другой программы. Понимаешь, не больше. Вот видишь, как все просто, легко на самом деле. Оказывается, нужно изучить тот мир, оказывается, нужно изучить, кто в тебе думает, кто тебя заставляет принимать те или иные решения, кто в тебе вызывает эмоции, кто управляет тобой. А когда ты понимаешь, что мир дуален, и он двойственен, и это реально, ты начинаешь обретать свободу своей личности.
Programs, patterns, and stereotypes of consciousness.
Consciousness is a biocomputer. It's mere programming, and that's all. This is allowed, this is not allowed. There is such an example, such a behavior pattern. Patterns are formed by 5 to 7 years of age. So already at that age, a certain pattern of behavior and thinking is established, as well as taboos, regulations, and permissions. If a person was not brought up in a family and in a society with spiritual priorities, these patterns are approximately the same.
As a rule, at the core of a major hook, so to say, of the anchor of the animal nature, which thoroughly holds a personality and makes him be a conductor of the animal mind throughout his whole life, is the initial experience of gaining power over other people. In most cases, it has its origin in the primary sexual surge. It is not surprising that for a person, main problems arise during the primary and secondary sexual surges, at the age of 5-7 years old, the beginning of formation of personality, and 9-13 years old, establishment of the personality. And here is the key point. It is not about the fact that at this age sexual desires awaken people, or something else. All this is natural for the environment of the animal world. Everything is much deeper here, because behind all this there is a mechanism of manipulation, a mechanism of attachment to and selection of programs of the animal mind by the personality, owing to the primary surge, and such force the animal nature, if it prevails in a person, creates and reinforces a manipulator image in the personality's consciousness, endowing it with alpha significance. Thus, figuratively speaking, a deal is concluded between the personality and the animal mind, generating a kind of energy clouds in the invisible world. In religion, they are called evil spirits or demons. Attachment to them happens due to the power of the person's attention and gets entrenched in the depths of the person's consciousness in the form of his favorite images, which continue to dominate the personality throughout their life, until the person stops nourishing these images with his own attention. It does not matter which of the negative images are generated. It is important that it takes away power and time from a person. It spoils his life and causes him to suffer.
То есть сознание — не что иное, как кандалы на личности, не пускающие его в бескрайность. И оно всегда будет рассказывать и пугать человека миром духовным. Понимаешь? То есть вот оно будет пугать, рассказывать, что на этом пути ты столкнешься с массой проблем. Ты потеряешь все, что ты имеешь. А что ты имеешь? Вот покажи хоть что-то, что имеешь. Назови, скажи, что имеешь. Или пусть хоть кто-то назовет. Ну, многие скажут: дом, машина, дети. Я понимаю. Но заберешь ли ты хоть что-то с собой после смерти? Имеешь то, что не утратишь. А что ты не утратишь, если ты утратишь даже жизнь?
Consciousness distorts all the time. All the time, it distorts even such notions as freedom and power. it immediately changes to external. What is external power? It is an ability to control consciousness of another person and is in fact the biggest thrill. Activation of certain neurons that produce the neuromediator of pleasure is at the maximum, the greatest surge, not even because of physical power, but caused by the possibility of such a subtle psychological power over consciousness of another person. Since at that time, ego simply experiences an incredible triumph, it gets inflated to its maximum size. Whereas internal power is related to self-control, that is, it is first and foremost power over oneself, over one's weaknesses, fears, over any manifestations of the animal mind or the animal nature in oneself, over that same pride, vanity, desire for recognition. That is, this internal power gives a person precisely such a quality as strength of the spirit. The person gains an inner support and indeed attains safety thanks to it. He no longer defends himself by controlling other people, for he is protected. Such person has a connection with the infinite source of strength, energy, and love. He has already reached eternity and has nothing to be afraid of. He's protected to the maximum extent, and any fear disappears. At the very beginning of our conversation, we mentioned that it is fear that provokes one to desire for gaining power, external power. Regarding freedom, it is the same thing. Well, man is not free externally. We drink, we eat, we depend on each other. Each person is unable to do everything. We ask each other for advice, for information, for various products and services. That is, a human being is completely dependent externally, totally. One can be free only in one's inner world, meaning there can only be inner freedom, freedom over which thought to choose, which feeling to feel, which aspiration to implement, and what to serve. That's the whole human freedom. That is, true freedom is internal freedom, while true power is the power over oneself. But naturally, everything is twisted by the system and directed to the external. That is, the original impulse is simply scattered on things that can give an illusion of power and freedom. And as they say, across from the Statue of Liberty, there's always a statue of responsibility. And this cannot be otherwise. If a person is free internally, and he has self-control, and that very power of the spirit manifests itself, then he can do a lot of constructive things. And by the way, no other desire arises in such a person. He can really help other people in their spiritual self-perfection, in learning themselves. Such a person is striving to give internal freedom to another person, so that he too would learn it, so that he would be able to unleash his potential independently and come to the very same force, the power of the spirit too. That is all. Such a person actually has no other desires in this life. Whereas if a person has been guided by external power and seeking external freedom, illusory freedom, then correspondingly, responsibility comes through the action of destructive forces in relation to him, to all his constituent parts, the physical one and at the level of energy information, and generally, one way or another, it will affect his soul, since the soul will not get freedom either.
Thanks to the information given in the *ALLATRA book, one can clearly trace substitution by the system of the main human values. That is, how the animal mind substitutes numerous goals and objectives of a temporary stay in this world for the main meaning of human life. We can see how a human trades the eternity for this, that is, exchanges true life for death.
То есть совершает обмен настоящей жизни на смерть.
True freedom.
Freedom can only be internal, and that is freedom from programs of consciousness. That means how the personality can be outside the power of such programs of consciousness.
Если человек духовно свободен, ну, это не мои слова, об этом говорили много, и много святых, то посади его в темницу, он будет свободен. А подними его на гору, и он будет свободен. Ну, в общем, что с ним не делай, он все равно будет свободен, да? То есть, как не лишая его свободы, тело его, дух ты не сможешь ограничить. В этом-то и проблема. А у нас сейчас в современном обществе наблюдается как раз нападение на дух человеческий, ограничение духа. У нас все делается для того, чтобы доминировало материальное. Убить в человеке честь, убить в человеке совесть, подменить ее ложными понятиями. И в то же время подбить человека на борьбу за свободу. И человек борется с утра до вечера, с кем? С одним поборолся, с другим борется, с третьим. И всю жизнь будет бороться. Никогда не найдет той свободы, потому что она внутри, ее нет во внешнем. Настоящая свобода — это та свобода, которая ведет в мир, где нет смерти, где нет боли, где нет страданий.
How can it be done so that consciousness would be a good tool for a person? It is important, first of all, to focus not on the external, on how to solve an external problem, but to concentrate on how to bring oneself in order. This is the key point. If a person understands this, no matter what situation would be happening around him, he's first of all engaged in this, bringing himself in order. Yet what does it mean to bring oneself in order? It means to get out from under the influence of consciousness, that is, to observe what is happening, what is being imposed. I can observe the flow of thoughts, desires, emotions. I'm not involved in them. The flow of a river. I'm sitting on the bank and watching this flow. This is a skill which is important for a person to develop every day. This is the daily work on oneself. That is to constantly observe what is happening in your inner world and to develop the quality of being the observer. And in order for a person to actually restore the lost connection, the lost unity with the spiritual world, and this intuitive cognition and perception of the world through feelings, in order to find oneself, to feel the deepest feelings of the soul, for this, it is important to master spiritual tools, such as spiritual practices. The most important thing is to restore this unity, that is to switch your attention to the deepest feelings that constantly flow from the soul towards the personality.
От души направлены к личности.
Что такое глубинные чувства? Скажем так, люди не способны понять, что такое мысль. Они видят ее результат. Когда влаживают силу своего внимания. Люди не могут понять, что такое глубинные чувства, даже если влаживают силу своего внимания и вызывают, скажем так, поверхностные эмоции, как замена этих глубинных чувств. А глубинные чувства, они зарождаются внутри, из внутреннего колодца бескрайнего, как свежие воды, неиссякаемые эти воды. И чтобы соприкоснуться с теми глубинными чувствами, достаточно лишь открыть внутренние врата. Это прекрасная составляющая, которую не хочется называть ни эмоциями, ни мыслями, словами человеческими, да, в нашем понимании. А все-таки это перевести, и оно правильно переводится, как глубинные чувства, даже с древних источников. Они бескрайние. Бескрайние так же, как тот мир, из которого они исходят. Это соприкосновение с миром Бога, с истиной. И оно не лживо, оно реально. Вот это и есть глубинное чувство. Можно назвать это светом от неиссякаемого источника. Но они есть. И физически их прочувствовать нельзя. А проблема как раз заключается в том, что люди пытаются воспринять их физически. Скажи, можешь ты почувствовать мысль физически?
Нет.
А почему? Ведь у тебя есть целый ворох. И даже выполняя какую-то практику или сосредоточиваясь на молитве, тебе ж мысли отвлекают, мешают. Почему?
Конечно.
Ну ты же их чувствуешь? Или ты их не чувствуешь?
Не чувствую.
Но ты их наблюдаешь.
Наблюдаю, да.
Но также люди наблюдают и чувства глубинные, настоящие. Ну, пугаются их света и загораживают свое сознание тенями иллюзий.
Человек сам закрывает.
Обязательно. Вот это и есть глубинное чувство. Это как серебряная нить, связывающая личность с миром бескрайним.
Вы сказали, что глубинные чувства находятся за вратами, да? Как человеку открыть эти врата?
Просто. Об этом можно много рассказывать, но лучше прочувствовать. Откройся и почувствуешь. Как и многие сейчас. Ведь это не сложно. Приведу простой пример. Он не совсем правильный, но он где-то ассоциативен. Вот закрой глаза и положи руку. Вот яркий свет, да?
Угу.
Видишь темно? Убери руку. Глаза закрыты, а свет видишь.
Есть.
Вот даже когда сознание активно, достаточно успокоиться и перестать врать себе. Убрать его негодование, злость, эмоции, которые он напускает. Вот сейчас, прямо сейчас. И вот просто погрузиться своим силу внимания, погрузить в бескрайность. Вот каждый человек чувствует, что в нем внутри где-то есть бескрайность. Вот сосредоточиться на этой бескрайности. И ты увидишь, что эта бескрайность полна, она не пуста. Это не пустой колодец, а это неиссякаемый колодец живых вод. Все начинается с самого человека. Вот что он выбрал для себя, тем он и будет. Куда он вкладывает силу своего внимания, то и реализуется. Если человек хочет обрести духовную свободу, он ее обретет. А если он хочет оставаться рабом, он и останется рабом. Жить или умереть выбирает человек сам.